all share nobody should be in this country illegally. Not now, not ever. We'll talk about it when Freedom returns at 5.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. I read nonfiction, Amy, but when I do read fiction, I like sci-fi, like Michael Crichton, the great Michael Crichton, or the spy novelists. Obviously, Tom Clancy,
yes,
Brad Thor, and also our next guest, Brad Taylor. Brad Taylor is a former Special Forces and Army infantryman turned spy novelist. He's got a series featuring Pike Logan, like Brad Thor has Scott Harvath. His protagonist, Brad Taylor's, is Pike Logan. He's got a new book out. It's called Operator Down, which features Pike Logan and members of the task force, an extra-legal counterterrorism unit charged with defending the United States and its allies. This is the 12th in the Pike Logan series, and it marks the return of some fan favorites for fans of Brad Taylor's work, including the fan favorites return, Israeli operators Shoshana and Aaron. For more on the book, we're pleased to be joined by author Brad Taylor. Brad, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, one of the hallmarks of Tom Clancy, it was kind of one of my favorites growing up, was the detail. The detail, military equipment, hardware, logistics, just the detail of the storytelling. And it seems that's one of your hallmarks as well when it comes to kind of setting the scenes in your books and the dynamics between the characters in the books. And if you could, because I think it'd be interesting to people, the process by which you construct these stories and the detail that you offer in your books.
Sure. Initially I started out just by looking at the world problems. I still do a lot of security consulting, so I keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on in the world. And something will come up in the news that'll spark my interest. That's generally how I do it. And this time it was a little bit different. I was doing 2 books a year, which is a pretty grueling pace. And I went back to 1 book a year for Operator Down. And so I had some time to really do some research. I wanted to bring Aaron and Shoshana back, so I started looking at Israel. What do they have? How can this factor in? I looked at the diamond trade in Israel, which then took me to Africa and the Kimberlite mines there. Now, when I do the books, I always go out and try to do as much on-the-ground research as I can. And so I was looking at the countries over there where I wanted to go to. And most of them are not nice places I didn't want to go, like Sierra Leone, things like that. And I found the country of Lesotho, which is a microstate surrounded by South Africa. I'd never even heard of it before, I'm embarrassed to say. And they produce some of the largest gem-quality diamonds in the world. And they have a history of coups. And so the plot with the coups started to form, and that's kind of where I went with it.
Wow. What did you learn about the diamond trade?
One thing I learned that was interesting, number one, that Israel is the largest exchange in the world. Well, Antwerp will say it's them, but they're competing. But Israel doesn't produce any diamonds. All the diamonds come to them, and they either get polished or rough stones, and they do all the exchange there inside Israel. I got to go inside the diamond exchange itself, and I was fascinated by how centralized the diamond industry is. It's not, it's not spread out all over the place. It's basically Antwerp and Israel.
When you're doing this sort of recon in a land that you're not familiar with for the purposes of your book, do you, particularly as you say, a region known for coups, do you ever run into issues?
Yeah, this one I did. Usually I never run into issues because I'm not stupid, but this time I was very stupid. I went to Lesotho and said there's going to be a coup. I hit the ground and I didn't do any touristy stuff. I was doing things, I was prepping for a coup. I mean, I could figure out how to do a coup in that country. And so I had taken pictures of the prime minister's residence, the parliament, all these things, radio stations, things that I would need for research. And I was trying to find a special forces base, which would be the basis of the coup, the Lesotho Special Forces Base. I found it, and I was talking to the guy at the front gate, asking him questions, where they do this and where they do that. And I got rolled up by counterintelligence, and I got interrogated for about 6.5 hours. They accused me of being a spy. I had really no leg to stand on because, they took my camera, and the only pictures in there, I had a picture of the prime minister's residence, and in the picture is a sign saying, "Don't take pictures."
Oh.
Everything in it was just horrible.
So how did you get out of there?
No.
And did you get your camera back?
I had no way to explain it. I've had some training in that kind of thing, and I just stuck to my story. And I didn't want to tell them I was writing a book because then luckily they didn't Google me. Because if they'd seen my bio, they'd have definitely thought I was a spy. They'd already accused me of working for the U.S. Embassy and all this stuff. And so I just stuck to my guns. Luckily, I had not been to the embassy yet, and so that was worked in my favor.
I thought the twist was going to be, and it turns out they were all Brad Taylor fans, and I just had to sign a bunch of books, and they let me go.
Yeah, that'd have been nice if it had happened that way. At the end of the day, they released me because they were convinced I was a spy. I talked to the commander. The commander came in. At least I assume he's a commander. They were all in civilian clothes. And he gave me this big speech, and I realized he thinks I really am a spy, and I'm going to go back to the embassy and repeat this speech to the ambassador. So he was trying to feed me information. So they eventually let me go, and I booked it on out of that country.
Interesting. Well,
Wait, did you get your camera back?
Life imitating art.
Yeah, they gave me everything back. They weren't very professional, to be honest with you. I mean, I've seen much more professional interrogations before. For instance, they didn't make me unlock my phone, which had a lot of incriminating stuff on it. I showed them my phone, just said I have no service, which I didn't in Lesotho, and so that was the end of it. They didn't make me do anything else. They didn't make me empty my pockets. I had some pocket litter that was pretty incriminating. They did look at the camera. They gave it all back, but they were kind of haphazard. They did the good cop, bad cop, all kinds of different techniques, but it was I mean, at the time I was getting kind of worried. I was like, okay, they may not be letting me go. And I didn't want to ask for the embassy's help because they despised the embassy, and so I wanted to distance myself from the embassy at all costs. But eventually, towards the end there, I was about to say, okay, I've had enough of this. I want to see my embassy. But then they decided to let me go.
What was the inspiration for Pike Logan and for launching a writing career after your time in the military?
Pike Logan's, he's kind of an amalgamation of people I served with, and the inspiration was kind of, when you're doing, people have a misconception. Pike Logan works for the task force, which is an extrajudicial counterterrorism force, and people think we actually have something like that, and we don't. People would be amazed at how hard it is to actually do missions anywhere in the world with all the wickets going through the State Department, the military, and deployment orders and things like that. And so we used to kind of fantasize about a task force-like unit. Boy, wouldn't it be neat if we had a unit that's only controlled by like 13 people and they could launch us anywhere. And so I created a task force and started writing about it.
Now, if you didn't read the 11 books prior to this one, can you start with number 12 here?
Yeah, definitely. They're all standalone. The only thing that might happen is it's a universe that's connected. So in this book, I'm trying to think. Yeah, there's probably they may talk about something that happened in a previous book, so you might get a spoiler. You won't even realize it has nothing to do with this plot. You won't realize as you're reading this book, and if you read a previous book, you go, oh, wait a minute, I remember that.
You talked about you still do security consulting, and so you're staying abreast of the news cycle, particularly perhaps foreign activity. And so I wonder how you consumed the information that was coming out about that tragic circumstance in Mali with those Special Forces soldiers who were ambushed and killed, and that investigation that is ongoing and still pending in terms of what could have happened there. Do you have any particular perspective on that as somebody who was Special Forces, maybe was the subject of similar deployments? Yeah,
my perspective would be, honestly, that all the hue and cry about how they didn't have medevac, they didn't have air support, they didn't have this, they didn't have that. Special Forces are deployed all over the world. And to hear Lindsey Graham, I'm in Charleston, South Carolina, he's my senator, say, I didn't even know anybody was there. They're all over the world, and you can't expect a perfect outcome for everything. They're in hotspots. We don't send Special Forces to Disneyland. We send them where the bad guys are. And so you can't expect – it's a dangerous job. Now, the investigation is going to come out and see if, what mistakes were made, if any. But, when I saw that what had happened, the first thing I thought was, it's not a perfect world. There's guys everywhere, and sometimes they run into bad guys. In Somalia just yesterday, 5 Kenyans were killed.
Right.
Part of the peacekeeping force there. It's just a dangerous place. You can't have a Special Forces ODA deploy with its own air support and predators. It just doesn't happen.
See, Amy, I told you everybody is cool moving to Charleston. That's why I want to be there. Brad Taylor's down there. Bill Murray's down there.
And also, what's down there right now, though, is snow. How much did it snow down there?
6, yeah. It looks like Colorado right now. I'm looking out. There was a blizzard last night.
Wow.
Well, that's not good.
Well, and nobody knows how to drive in that stuff.
No, we just shut down completely.
How do you separate and or integrate your security consulting work with your writing?
I certainly don't integrate it. Most of that stuff's real world stuff that I'm not going to put in a book. But it certainly informs what I'm writing about. There's always things that happen that I find out about that I'm like, wow, that's kind of unique. I'll write about that. For instance, in this book, there's a small piece of a Mavic drone, a commercial drone the guy uses for intelligence collection. And I ran into a guy that does a counter-IED program, which now has the mandate for counter-UAV because ISIS is strapping bombs to these commercial drones. I'm not talking Predators. I'm talking DJI, small drones, and bombing people with them. And so I started picking his brain. And some of the stuff those drones can do is just absolutely phenomenal. In the old days, back, when I was running around, like when we first crossed the berm into Iraq, you had to have satellite photos of everything. Now you've got these drones that can give you detailed, granular images of what you need to look at, and they can put it in a backpack. It's kind of amazing.
He is Brad Taylor. The new book in the long-running Pike Logan series, Operator Down. So if you're not familiar with Brad Taylor, get familiar with him through Operator Down. If you are familiar with him, you're going to enjoy this story just based on what he told us about his time in Africa, harrowing time in Africa. Brad Taylor, Operator Down, thanks so much for joining us. Good luck with the book.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. If they want to read an excerpt, they can go to bradtaylorbooks.com.
All right, there you go. bradtaylorbooks.com is the website. Thanks, Brad.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's